Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you a story that will transform the way you see life and eternity. Let's meet Callan Hawthorne, a dedicated pediatric nurse who had a stunning near-death experience after a serious accident. Not only did Callan see Jesus, he was taken to the New Jerusalem and returned with an urgent message that could change everything you believe about heaven. What he discovered will give you goosebumps. So leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any powerful stories like this. Now, get ready to embark on this incredible and revealing journey. My name is Callan Hawthorne. I'm 42 years old, I work as a pediatric nurse, and I dedicate my life to caring for children at their most vulnerable moments. My routine, although challenging, has always been a source of purpose and gratitude. I am fortunate to share my life with my wife, Eliza, an elementary school teacher who, in addition to being my rock, is the heart of our family. We have two incredible children, Ellie, 9, who inherited her mother's love of books, and Asher, 6, whose smile seems to brighten even the most difficult days. My life was in many ways like everyone else's. We had our challenges, bills to pay, schedules to keep, and dreams for the future. I'm not a particularly religious man, but I've always had a sense of spirituality, a belief in something greater. However, what happened to me that night transformed everything. It was a Thursday, like so many others. My shift at the hospital had been long and exhausting. We had admitted one seriously ill child and lost another to a condition beyond our control. No matter how hard I tried to leave work at the hospital, there were days when the emotional weight followed me home. All I wanted that night was to come in, hug my kids, and listen to Eliza talk about her day. I had promised Ellie that I would help with the science project and that I would read Asher's favorite story before bed. So as I drove home, I did what I do every night. I thought about my family and was thankful for them. Little did I know that, in that moment, my life was about to change forever. A fraction of a second. It's everything that separates normality from chaos. The sound of the impact, the shattering glass, the instant pain. Everything happened so quickly that I barely had time to understand what was happening. However, in that moment when my vision went black, something inside me knew that this was just the beginning of a journey I could never imagine. I barely had time to react. The car coming from the intersection, a black SUV, ran the red light at a speed that seemed impossible. I remember the deafening sound of the collision, metal crunching, glass shattering, and the impact throwing me against the steering wheel with crushing force. It was an instant, but it felt like an eternity. Everything went silent right after the impact. A heavy, almost unreal silence. My eyes tried to open, but all I saw was darkness. I felt a throbbing pain in every part of my body, but strangely enough, it wasn't unbearable. Then something peculiar happened. I started to feel light, as if the weight of the pain and my own body had lifted. When I realized it, I was looking down. It was as if he was suspended in midair, floating above the scene of the accident. I saw my car destroyed, its side crushed, and my body trapped inside it, motionless. Paramedics were rushing toward the wreckage, their muffled voices sounding far away. "We need cutting equipment here now," I heard one of them scream as they examined the wreckage. There was a man who seemed to be leading the team. I found out later that his name was Mark Devereaux. He was kneeling next to my body, checking my pulse. His expression was one of urgency, but also of determination. Even at that moment, I was in awe of his calmness and professionalism. As I watched, something inside me changed. There was no fear, no panic, just an indescribable feeling of peace. The pain was completely gone. I didn't understand what was happening, but it felt like time had stopped, and I was in a state between life and death. It was like I was in a place of transition, waiting for the next step. It was then that I noticed something new. A light, bright and warm, began to appear in the distance. She was not just an ordinary light. It felt alive, pulsing with an energy I had never felt before. There was something irresistible about her, like she was calling me, and I couldn't resist. I began to be drawn to it, and everything around me, the accident, the paramedics, my own body, began to slowly disappear. As the bright light enveloped me, all I felt was love. A love so pure and welcoming that it made me completely forget the world I had left behind. There was no pain, no guilt, no fear, just a feeling that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The light was not just a glow, it was alive. pulsing with heat and an energy that seemed to communicate directly with my soul. Then, he appeared. At first, I didn't immediately recognize who it was. A figure with a serene and majestic presence began to emerge from the light, walking towards me. He wore a white robe, which seemed to radiate an indescribable glory, but it was his face that really struck me. His eyes, with a deep and penetrating tone, conveyed more than words could express. It was as if he saw every part of me, the good and the bad, and yet he accepted me completely. "Callan," he said, and just hearing my name in his voice was enough to make my heart flutter. His voice was soft but powerful, like a calm river that still carried immense strength. "Come on, I want to show you something." "Who are you?" I asked, still confused, but at the same time filled with an inexplicable confidence that I was safe. "I'm Jesus," he replied, with a welcoming smile that seemed to light up everything around me. "And you are here because your journey is not yet over. But before you return, I want you to see what I have prepared for those who trust in me." His words hit me like a wave. I was a man of faith, but I was never particularly devout. I had my doubts, my flaws, my insecurities, and yet he was there, welcoming me with an unconditional love that ignored all my mistakes. "But why me?" I stammered, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. "Because you are loved, Callan," he replied, holding out his hand. "And because there is something you need to understand before you continue your mission on Earth." When I held his hand, an indescribable feeling of peace came over me. The light around us intensified, and in the blink of an eye, we were in a place that would take anyone's breath away. "Now, come," he said. "Let me show you what you never imagined." Holding Jesus' hand, I felt like I was being carried away by a river of pure light. Everything around me was indescribably beautiful, with colors beyond what my human eyes could capture. The air felt alive, vibrant, and every breath I took filled my soul with a peace that transcended any earthly experience. "Welcome," Jesus said, with a serene smile. "This is just a glimpse of what awaits those who follow the path of love and faith." The landscape before us was like something out of a dream. There were tall, majestic mountains that seemed to be made of crystals, shining in shades of gold and silver. Rivers of liquid light snaked across the terrain, reflecting a rainbow of vibrant colors. Giant trees, with leaves that seemed to sparkle like jewels, formed peaceful forests, where a soft melody, almost like a heavenly choir, filled the environment. "This place," I began, but my voice trailed off. I had no words to describe what I was seeing. "Oh, it's just the beginning, Callan," Jesus said, his expression gentle. "There is much more for you to understand." We walked through meadows covered in flowers that seemed to be made of pure light. The colors pulsed as if they were alive, and each petal emitted a soft, invigorating scent. It was a world where everything seemed to be in perfect harmony, connected by an invisible but palpable force. After a while, I saw something in the distance, a city that shone with an indescribable light. As we got closer, I noticed that the light was emanating directly from the city. "It is the New Jerusalem," Jesus explained, "the holy city, prepared for those who follow the path of truth." The city was stunning. Tall walls, made of shining jasper, surrounded it, and 12 enormous gates, each carved from a single pearl, opened, inviting all to enter. The streets were paved with pure gold, so transparent that they looked like glass. In the center of the city, a crystal-clear river flowed directly from the throne of God, flanked by the tree of life, whose fruits shone with a light of their own. "This is a place where there is no pain, suffering, or death," Jesus said as we walked through the city. "Here, everything is perfect, because it is immersed in the presence of God." Looking at that scene, I felt a joy so profound that it seemed impossible to contain. This wasn't just a place. It was our forever home, a reflection of what our souls truly longed for. As we walked through New Jerusalem, my attention was captured by a structure that stood out among the others. It was a magnificent palace, of gigantic proportions, made of materials that I cannot describe with precision. The walls seemed to be formed from living crystal, reflecting colors that gently changed as divine light touched their surface. He didn't just shine, it seemed to pulse with life. "This is the home I have prepared for you," Jesus said, standing before the main entrance, which was made up of gigantic doors of gold and pearl. His voice was serene, but there was a solemnity to his words that made me feel the magnitude of the moment. "For me?" I asked, astonished. unable to understand how something so great could be destined for someone like me. Jesus smiled. Everything you did with love, every act of kindness, every silent sacrifice contributed to this. Not because of merit, but because true love leaves marks that transcend the earth. Upon entering the palace, I was overcome by a wave of familiarity. Every detail seemed to reflect something deep about me. There were colors that always brought me peace, like the deep blue of the evening sky, combined with shades of green that reminded me of the woods of Oregon, where I grew up. Pictures on the walls showed special moments in my life, many of which I didn't even remember. It was as if every smile, every gesture of compassion, was immortalized there. Jesus led me down a long hallway to a specific room. When I opened the door, I was speechless. It was a space that seemed tailor-made for me, with objects and details that reflected my essence. On a central table, there were books that symbolized my prayers and reflections, and on the walls, I saw records of moments in my life where I had chosen to love, even when it was difficult. This is a reflection of what you have planted in the earth, Jesus explained. Every prayer, every act of kindness, and every time you chose love over indifference was recorded here. It is not the great accomplishments that fill this place, but the small ones, the ones you did without expecting anything in return. My mind tried to understand that. It was surreal, but deeply true. Each small act of kindness seemed to shine with its own light, forming what seemed to be the foundation of that space. There's more, Jesus said, leading me into another room. This room had a long, infinitely long table covered with a banquet that seemed to have no end. It was like an invitation to perfect communion, to eternal celebration among all of God's children. One day, he said, you will join everyone here. But now, there is more that needs to be shown. The love and acceptance I felt in that moment was overwhelming. I have never felt so complete, so at peace. It was as if everything in my life had finally made sense. Upon leaving the heavenly palace room, Jesus took me to a completely different place. The soft and welcoming light of the celestial landscapes gave way to an environment full of solemnity and gravity. It wasn't scary, but there was a sense of urgency and importance that made me hold my breath. We stopped in front of a large space that seemed to have no end. The floor was made of something akin to pure glass, and a raised platform glowed with an indescribable light. It was the throne of God. Even without seeing a figure clearly, I could feel his presence, a force so powerful it was impossible to describe. Around the throne, angels of light moved, each with an expression of absolute reverence. "Callan," Jesus said, his voice more serious now, "what you will see is to understand what is at stake. This is the moment when all of humanity will be confronted with the truth." Suddenly, images began to appear before me. It was like watching thousands of stories simultaneously, each depicting a person in front of the throne. Each soul was confronted with their life, their choices, and the impact they had on the world. The most impressive thing was how each decision seemed to take on an eternal dimension. There was no way to hide or make up anything. Everything was exposed with absolute clarity. I saw people who had chosen to live by love, by compassion, being received with joy and celebration. The lights around them shone brighter, and their faces reflected peace and gratitude. But I also saw those who had rejected love, who had lived only for themselves. There was a weight in their expressions, a regret so deep it seemed impossible to bear. "It's not about perfection," Jesus explained, anticipating my doubts, "but the willingness to accept the love I offer, to live with a heart focused on good. This is what determines the eternal destiny of each soul." In one moment, I saw something that marked me deeply, a person being separated from the light. The pain on his face was incomparable, but what was most devastating was the emptiness, the separation from God. I felt my soul shake at that. "I don't want anyone to experience this," Jesus said, with sadness in his eyes. "That's why I need you, Callan. You need to share what you saw and help people understand that there is a path of hope, a path of life." His words penetrated deep into my heart. I understood, once and for all, the urgency of living with purpose and accepting the love and salvation that Jesus offers. After the vision of the final judgment, Jesus once again led me along a path shrouded in light. This time, there was a softer, more nostalgic feeling in the air, as if something deeply personal was about to happen. I didn't know what to expect, but inside me, a silent longing began to grow. "Callan," Jesus said, with a tone of infinite gentleness, I want you to see how love transcends even the barriers of death. There are bonds that are not broken, even when we leave Earth. As I rounded a bend, I saw familiar figures in the distance, and my heart almost stopped. There they were, my grandparents, both deceased for years, but so vibrant and radiant that they seemed rejuvenated. My grandmother, with her silver hair now shining like pure light, was smiling with an expression of love that I had never seen before. Beside her, my grandfather waved Yutiang with the same firm, welcoming posture that always made me feel safe as a child. "My boy," my grandmother exclaimed as she hugged me. His voice was the same as I remembered, but it carried a tone of serenity that seemed almost heavenly. "We have always been with you." Emotion overwhelmed me. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to understand how it was possible to feel so much love, so much peace in a single moment. "You were never alone," my grandfather added, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. "Every prayer you said, every difficult moment you faced, we were there, interceding for you." Jesus watched in silence, with a slight smile on his face, as if he knew exactly the impact that this reunion would have on me. As we talked, my grandmother showed me visions of important moments in my life, not the big ones, but the small gestures of kindness and love that I didn't even remember. She showed me the time I comforted a friend, the time I volunteered to work overtime at the hospital to help someone, and even the stories I read to Ellie and Asher before bed. "These moments," she explained, "are the ones that shine brightest here. Never underestimate the power of a small act of love." Before we left, my grandmother held my hands and said something I will never forget. "Callan, you still have work to do. Don't be afraid to come back. What's coming is bigger than you know." When I said goodbye, I felt like part of me had been restored, like a missing piece in my soul had been filled. I understood that even those we lost remain linked to us, like an eternal bridge between earth and heaven. Jesus then touched my shoulder, and in an instant, we were back on the path. "Now, Callens," he said, "there's more you need to understand." Jesus continued to guide me, and soon we were surrounded by a vibrant light that seemed to emanate from all sides. As we advanced, I began to notice figures moving within this light, tall, majestic beings enveloped in a golden and white glow. They were angels. They didn't look exactly like the images we see in paintings or books. Their forms were translucent, almost ethereal, but full of presence. Some carried instruments that emitted music so pure and harmonious that it seemed to resonate directly with my soul. Others were on their knees, in postures of worship, radiating devotion and reverence that made me feel small in the face of the greatness I was witnessing. "These are my servants," Jesus explained, looking at the angels with visible love. "They have important missions, both here and on earth." As I said this, a new scene formed before me. I saw a huge angel, with wings that shone like crystal, hovering over a hospital room. I looked closely and realized it was the room where I worked. In the corner of the room, a smaller angel held what appeared to be a small beam of light, and that light floated directly to a child who was in bed, sick. "Angels guard prayers and bring them to me," said Jesus. "They are always on the side of those who pray sincerely, even if they are not always noticed." I was paralyzed by the realization of how many times I had prayed, in the silence of my heart, asking for help for my little patients, and now I understood that those prayers had never been ignored. Jesus raised his hand, and the scene changed again. This time, I saw how small gestures of love and kindness made by people on earth shone like sparks of light in the sky. It was as if each act of compassion created a direct reflection in the heavenly dimensions, contributing to greater harmony. "Every act of true love has an eternal impact," Jesus said, looking at me. "Even the smallest gestures shine brightly here, and that light never fades." I began to understand the depth of what he was showing. The daily worries that so often occupy our minds seemed insignificant compared to the grandeur of this connection between heaven and earth. I realized that many of the things we deem important, status, possessions, pride, had no value in the heavenly realm. What really mattered were the moments of genuine kindness and love. "Callan," Jesus continued, "you will see even more. But remember, you have the power to make your life shine in heaven. Teach others that every choice of love creates an eternal reflection." My soul was deeply touched. For the first time, I felt like I was beginning to understand the true purpose of life. The atmosphere around me started to change. The light that was once comforting and enveloping became more diffuse, as if it was preparing to leave me. Jesus stopped and turned to me, his gaze full of love but also seriousness. "Callan," he said, with a voice that sounded like an echo in my soul, "you have seen what you needed to see. Now it is time to return. Your journey on earth is not yet over, and there is much to be done." I felt torn. Part of me wanted to remain there, in that place of indescribable peace, but another part began to understand that I had a mission, a responsibility that could not be ignored. "But what if I fail?" I asked, my voice full of uncertainty. "What if I can't convey what I saw? People might not believe me." Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder, and in that moment, a deep calm spread throughout my being. "You don't need to worry about that, Callan. I'll be with you every step of the way. Speak from the heart, and the seeds will be planted. Your mission is not to convince but to share." I wanted to say more, ask more, but the words escaped me. Before I could react, he reached out and touched my chest. A feeling of warmth and energy swept through me, and everything around me began to dissolve into a whirlwind of light and darkness. Suddenly, a wave of pain washed over me. It was as if I was being pulled back into something heavy, something that felt tight and uncomfortable. My own body. I heard voices in the distance, muffled, but I recognized Eliza's voice calling my name. "Callan, please wake up," she said, her voice filled with despair. I opened my eyes slowly. The fluorescent lights of the hospital were harsh and cold, a stark contrast to the heavenly light I had just left. My body ached in places I didn't even know existed, but what struck me most was Eliza's look, full of tears, but also relief. "You're back," she whispered, holding my hand tightly. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. Only a faint moan came out. Still, deep in my heart, I knew I was back for a greater reason. 3 days had passed since the accident, and the doctors were amazed that I was alive. Although my body was weak, my soul was strengthened in a way I had never experienced before. I knew that second chance was a gift, not just for me, but for everyone I would have the opportunity to impact with my story. Waking up in the hospital was like being reborn, but not in the way I expected. My body was broken, my ribs were fractured, and my face was bruised, but my soul was whole. It was as if I had left a part of the old Callan behind, the one who lived with doubts, fears, and misplaced priorities. Eliza was by my side, her presence a constant throughout my recovery. She held my hand tightly, as if she feared I might leave again. When I finally managed to speak, my first sentence left her in tears. I saw Jesus. The doctors were astonished at my recovery. The accident was described as near fatal, and the fact that I survived without brain damage or permanent injuries was considered a miracle. For me, there was no doubt. God had given me a second chance, and I knew exactly what I needed to do with it. During the days that followed, I began to share, first with Eliza and then with my family, what I had experienced. It was not easy to put into words the visions, sensations, and depth of the experience. How do you explain something so vast and transcendent to someone who has never been there? Still, I did my best, and the reactions were mixed. Some listened with tears in their eyes, while others seemed skeptical, but that didn't matter to me. I knew my mission was simply to tell. My perspective on life has changed drastically. Things that once seemed important, bills, work, material ambitions, have lost their luster. Not that they were without value, but I understood that they were secondary compared to the love, compassion, and impact we can have on the lives of those around us. Returning to work as a pediatric nurse was like rediscovering my purpose. Every child I treated, every family I helped, was an opportunity to spread a little of the love I experienced in heaven. I began praying with my patients and their families, offering words of comfort and hope. But the biggest change happened at home. I started to prioritize simple moments with Eliza, Ellie, and Asher. I read stories to my children every night, helped with school projects, and was present in a way I never had been before. My marriage blossomed like never before because I now understood the eternal value of the love we shared. My journey to heaven gave me a clear mission, to help others see beyond everyday worries and live with eternal purpose. I have shared my story in churches and support groups and wherever there is someone willing to listen. Every time I tell what I experienced, I feel like I'm fulfilling the promise I made to Jesus. Now, I live each day with gratitude, knowing that this life is just the beginning of something infinitely greater. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.